Has anyone ever been to a wedding where someone actually objected, and if so, how did that go? Went to a wedding where they skipped that part because the bride's adult daughter was planning to object. My husband's first marriage. The brother of the bride stood up and said to my husband, "Say no, you can still be happy." They went through with the marriage, wound up divorcing with a messy breakup. Brother-in-law is still best friends with my husband. As far as he's concerned, he gained a brother and lost a sister and is better off for it, and he never lets him forget the fact that he was right and he should have bailed, lol. Edited for clarification. I wasn't there, so this is a second-hand story, and took place shortly after the wedding, but at the reception, no one could find the groom until they found him out in the limo having sex with one of the bridesmaids. The bride went back into the reception, stopped the band, took the microphone and told everyone there what just happened, naming the bridesmaid, and said the wedding would be annulled and all gifts would be returned. She totally took charge of the situation, but damn. I worked a wedding where one of the moms objected, but I think the groom knew that the parent was going to say something, so they just responded with, "Oh, sit down, parent's name, we knew you didn't like this a year ago, and clearly we're not going to change our minds today." The wedding continued like nothing happened, but the mom was low-key shunned and people avoided her at the reception. My auntie's fiancé was already married, lady stood up waving marriage cert, so wedding didn't go ahead. The reception was on a long boat, so we still went to that. The fiancé went back to home country to sort it out and never came back. Attended a wedding where the minister said something along the lines of, "If anyone here objects to this marriage, you can keep your mouth shut. Today is not about you." Not a wedding, but at a funeral, someone objected the death. At my uncle's funeral, his ex-wife and a local church, cult, leader tried to raise him from the dead. We were all sitting there like normal people at a normal funeral, and she walks up to the casket and starts yelling, "James Lester, raise up." I didn't know she was there, or I would have prepared myself for shenanigans. Also, I didn't know my uncle's middle name was Lester, so please imagine the confusion. So she and the cult leader are literally yelling at my uncle's body. Not surprisingly, my uncle refused to resurrect himself. They were escorted out. I've actually never told this story because it makes my family look insane. The wedding was at the bride's house. They had thought out almost every detail, except one. When the officiant got to the "speak now or forever hold your peace" part, the cuckoo clock expressed his opinion. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. It was a full 15 minutes before the ceremony could continue without everyone busting out laughing. I was at a small ceremony indoors, maybe 30 people tops listening. When the minister asked for any objections, a picture of the bride's dead grandmother that was hanging on the wall fell to the ground with a loud thump. We looked at each other, but the minister finished anyway. Divorced within a year. I objected. I took giving my sister away literally. I wasn't the brightest 3-year-old. A woman in her 20s at the time objected to her mom marrying my uncle. So she started yelling, "Mom, don't marry him," during the ceremony. The ceremony proceeded and some family on the mom's side lead the daughter away to quit interrupting. I don't blame her, my uncle was a lying, lazy bastard. The marriage didn't last. I went to a wedding where the best man was replaced a week before because he banged the bride. But the wedding still went ahead, just with a different best man. They are divorced now. I went to a Catholic wedding where, when the priest asked this question, one of the groomsmen did a very loud, long, throat clearing, which got everyone laughing. Everyone except for the bride's elderly Italian grandmother, who marched out of her seat and angrily hit the groomsman with her handbag and shouted at him in Italian. In my cousin's wedding, her friend said, "I object," because she was not invited to the wedding. She was kicked out of the wedding. I was at one where the groom thanked the bride's ex for dying as his loss was my gain. Didn't help the sons of his bride and ex were in attendance. Not quite the question as asked, but too funny to not share. Priest, any objections? Father of the bride, lets out the hardest, loudest, most complex-sounding sneeze I've ever heard in my life, completely with involuntarily saying achoo. Mother of the bride, hammered on champagne, for fuck's sake, Jerry. It took a good 5 minutes for everyone to regain their composure. I used to make wedding videos. Did one at an outdoor wedding spot high on one side of a valley. It had rained earlier in the day, but the storms had cleared and the wedding could continue. During the vows, I don't touch the camera, just step back and let it run. So I'm spaced out waiting for the vows to finish and notice a radio tower far across the valley. Suddenly lightning hits the radio tower. I had enough time to think, boy, when the thunder gets here it'll probably loud. I also had enough time to clue in that the minister was saying if anyone objects to this union let him speak now or forever. Keblum. Total silence in the venue. Preacher takes a second to look around and make sure everybody is alright, one has been smote. Well, that's never happened before. As far as I know, they're still married, that was 10 years or more ago. I had a friend who was a minister, and the subject came up if he asked the question during ceremonies he officiated. He laughed and said no way. He basically tells the couple not to include it because it only invites a moment of anxiety at best, misery at worst. His best story, and one of the reasons he stopped including the question, was a couple where the lead up to the wedding the couple was obviously in love. The bride-to-be was very smiley and happy. Day of the wedding, she's stone-faced. He knows something is up because he's never seen her like this, and he asks if she is okay. I'm fine. Right before the service he asks again. I'm fine. He gets to the question, does anyone object to this union? The bride reaches over, grabs the maid of honor, shoves her into the bride's spot and says, you're screwing him, you marry him. And then stormed out of the church. I dunno if it's a UK thing or even just a one specific church thing, but I was told by the priest in a rehearsal that if someone objects, even as a joke, the priest is required to pause the ceremony and talk to the objector alone to discuss their concerns and decide if they have a valid objection. Like it's not a fun jokey moment, it's a real legal part of the ceremony. He also said it used to be custom that if you raised an invalid objection you then had to pay for the wedding. At his rehearsal dinner, a coworker's mother, toast included, that his soon-to-be wife was a damn dirty whore who wasn't good enough for her son. Folks not happy. Video ended, so didn't see the whole thing. At wedding, which I attended, his mom started to say something at the speak now part, but was silenced by her daughter. Mom left and didn't see the rest of the ceremony. Everything about that poor guy was drama. Oldie but a goodie, this happened back in the 70s, this was shared to Lou by the guy who married my parents. It went something like this, does anyone object to this union? I do. That's my husband. So they paused the wedding, the bride, groom and the woman objecting went into a small room. The woman who objected provided documentation showing the groom was still legally her husband. Apparently, the couple had started divorce proceedings some time earlier, but never finished. The wedding was cancelled and everyone sent home. A relative visited one ceremony where it was asked if anyone objects, and the groom decided it's a good time for a joke and said, I do. The lady who was going to marry the couple just turned and left. They had to go through all the paperwork again and change the date. Got married, divorced in like 3 years if I remember correctly. Kind of. My uncle was getting married. Small, just a handful of family and a minister. I was videotaping. My grandmother was not into it at all. With each line spoken by the minister, she had a cutting, sarcastic response. I could not believe it. It was so unlike her. When that part came up, she said, I object. But does it really matter? They are going to do it anyway. The minister just ignored her and proceeded, business as usual. They were divorced within a year. Wish I had a copy. A friend of mine has a band that plays lots of weddings and other parties. They were hired for a birthday party that turned out to be a surprise wedding. The guy surprised his GF with a proposal and wanted to have a wedding ceremony then and there. She said no and left. Not a wedding I attended, but my best friend went to her aunt's wedding. Aunt's future, toxic, MIL whips out proof from Ancestry that they're actually first cousins. Wedding was cancelled, and the bride/groom haven't spoken since. Yes, at my cousin's, the bride's ex showed up, and when he stood up to object, my uncles grabbed him and bum-rushed him out of the church and gave him a tune-up in the parking lot. Catholic wedding, of course. Groom found out that bride was cheating 2 days before the wedding day. He spilled the beans while exchanging the vows. This will sound absolutely stupid, but when I was a kid, my deeply religious aunt had her wedding at a local church. During the objecting part, lightning struck very near the church. I remember to this day how the following thunder was so loud that the fancy windows of the church started rattling. Well, the timing of the strike was very unfortunate for my uncle, because my aunt took this as a sign of a god objecting to her marriage and called the wedding off on the spot. Needless to say, they married on the same day year later, and this time without objection from a god. They are still married to this day. My mom told me she was going to pay an old boyfriend to stand up and object at my wedding. She didn't in the end, but I did cast a quick look around in the church.